If you feel like you can't walk away, you've taken yourself hostage. I used to do life and death negotiations on a regular basis. And in point of fact, it was never one thing that was going to trigger a life or death moment. I absolutely believe that there's an energy in person. Empathy is about the transmission of information. Compassion is the reaction to that transmission. Now we have the information from neuroscience, which is a hard science. What does neuroscience tell us about the brain? The brain is about 75% negative. Survival mode is negative. Why? Because negative stuff will kill you, positive stuff won't. Neuroscience tells us that the best way to deactivate negatives is to call them out. There's an approach of using communication as a weapon to identify the other side. But when you get into the flow state, you're in a highly positive frame of mind. You're so much more capable. I pray regularly. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist, you're an agnostic, or you're Christian, you're Jew, you're Muslim, you're Buddhist. There's no getting around one of the 5 pillars of health, being spirituality. Now then, how you pursue that. Your fear centers, your amygdala stop you from saying things. Now, of course, you should be careful about how you say things. But the more we hold back, the more we're afraid of certain things that we might say, more likely it is that we should find a way to broach the subject, to get into it. A straight shooter is somebody that tells the truth. They just tell the truth in a gentle way. But we are so afraid of an adverse reaction, a judgmental reaction from people that it really interferes in honest communication, and honest communication is required for honest collaboration. So yeah, you take yourself hostage by being afraid to ask, being afraid to talk.
It's interesting that you're touching on truth, because one of my other conversations today was going to be around why it's so difficult to have difficult conversations. People have a lot of resistance to just having the tough chat. Is this in a similar vein to what you're describing there? Like, why is it so difficult to be honest?
Some of it too. It's difficult because we don't know how to tell the truth gently. We want to tell somebody something. It usually builds up a lot of pressure inside. We blurt it out in a very ungentle fashion, very harsh, very blunt fashion. Or, maybe it's our truth. It's how we see things. And we only have a perspective. We're not taking into account how the other person is seeing things. We might be overreacting to them negatively in a moment. A story I've been telling a lot lately is I get into a lift. I live here in Las Vegas, and I get into a lift, and the guy's just not helpful. Blatantly not helpful. I'm struggling with my suitcases, getting into the SUVs, not lifting a finger. Now, theoretically, Lyft is a service-oriented business. You want a 5-star review. You want a tip. How do you get into this service-oriented business hoping for a 5-star review without lifting a finger to help somebody out? So I could have been very harsh with him and judgmental about his behavior. Fortunately, I wasn't. My truth in the moment would have been, you're doing a lousy job. This is a free country. You're not driving a Lyft as a condition of your parole. If you don't like this job, find another. That might have been my truth in the moment. Instead, I dug into him a little bit, and I found out that while he was very angry, why he was driving Lyft was honorable. He's trying to help out his daughter who'd been abandoned by the father of her child. He's trying to take care of his grandson. He's driving Lyft where she's at work. He needs a job that's totally flexible because she's a nurse and she got shifts of all hours all over the place. So I needed to take the time to find out what was going on with this human being before I said anything. And a lot of people, their truth would have been in the moment like, this is how I see things, and I've been very judgmental. Instead, I dug into who he was. I found out a lot about him, and I actually admired him for why he was doing what he was doing. So telling people the truth is not our truth in the moment. We need to dig in and find out what's going on with the other side, and then, potentially have a conversation with him.
Yeah, this is starting to lean into the tactical empathy stuff we discussed last time we were here. It's less self-oriented. It's more what's present for the other individual.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the big difference. Empathy is about how the other side sees things, how they're reacting to things, their perspective. So that by definition does not mean that their view is accurate, or it's your view, it's a shared view, or it's even a view that a neutral third party would take in a moment. It's what their view is. That's your starting point. That's the hard part. But that puts you in a position to be able to share honesty with them on down the line once you've demonstrated understanding.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories is your one with the baggage handler and the magic wand.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it. I was in a moment, and fortunately I was playful in a moment. Being playful is a superpower. And then if you're really open to how the other side sees things, you might end up saying the perfect thing in a moment. And I did. I said, I need you to wave a magic wand, because I knew if somebody was working in lost luggage, their attitude is everybody that walks in here thinks we got magic wands. So it changed everything.
That was incredible. And so one of the things in there that I wanted to double click on, because we talked about calibrated questions last time, but one thing that I didn't notice was happening was in the instance with the Lyft driver there, you're asking, you're, labeling out how their state is going and what's happening for them. Um, and finding out more, eliciting more information about them. And one of the things that I think people are uncomfortable to do is to call things out. It's like, oh, you're having a tough day, because they seem like to think that that'll ruffle the other person's feathers. But actually, one of the things that I've learned following your work is it's actually really good to do that. And in fact, if you're getting it wrong, it's actually kind of good that you're getting it wrong, because you give them permission to correct you. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, that's one of the great secrets to communication, is often being willing to be corrected, even seeking correction. Now, nobody likes to be corrected because it's embarrassing. You feel like you've been judged. You feel like you're wrong. It's really getting corrected tends to be embarrassing, and embarrassment might be the most difficult human emotion of all. It's the only one that's most consistently linked to death. I thought I'd die of embarrassment. Everybody's got a phrase for that. So, but empathy is about what's going on with the other side, and to correct is an empowering thing to do. That's why people like to criticize, because criticism is correction, and it's empowering, and it makes you feel better about yourself and your life. So if you encourage people to correct you, now they feel better about themselves, and they're actually mentoring you. And they're probably correcting with honesty, which is really great, because the information you want it to be accurate, honest information. So to intentionally get corrected is frequently a way to really accelerate the relationship and your fact-finding, information-gathering aspect of the communication.
Yeah, I find that really, really helpful, because I think there's so much resistance that we have to, and you've got this other thing where you have micro practices throughout the day. So, like the Lyft driver, there was no reason for you to exercise your negotiation capabilities in such a small situation. I don't want to say small situation, but in such a situation. But you made it, an exercise to sort of go ahead and practice your ability to, yeah, negotiate in such a situation, or just elicit empathy and put the tools to use.
Yeah, well, in that particular instance, because I practice all the time, like it was a matter of survival. Like when I got in that lift, that guy was seething anger. And I absolutely believe that there's an energy in person. I don't think we have the scientific instruments to measure the in-person energy yet. I'm completely convinced from no shortage of anecdotal evidence that it exists. So he's exuding this extremely negative energy. And I'm the kind of person of the three conflict types: fight, flight, make friends, assertive, analyst, accommodator. I'm an assertive. So he'll trigger me. And I got a good half-hour ride in a car with this guy. And it's going to be all I can do. If I keep silent and fight being triggered, I'm probably going to lose that battle. And I can just imagine him let me off on the side of the road, and I'm standing on the freeway with my suitcases, watching him drive away because we've gotten into an argument. And again, free enterprise, he's got every right to put me out of his car. And so I'm like, I gotta break this dynamic somehow, because this is just going to go bad if I let it sit. So that one in particular was a matter of survival, so that I didn't have to walk home dragging my suitcases.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because you do elicit, in some ways, it's really important to be direct. And I don't want to say rip the Band-Aid off, but rip the Band-Aid off in some ways. But I think the key thing that I've taken away from your work is it's not to rip the Band-Aid off for what's happening for you. It's to rip the Band-Aid off for what's happening for them. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, it really is. And you got to be direct. You don't want to make other people guess what's going through your mind. But the issue is sequencing. One of my favorite books, Robert Mnookin, former head of program on negotiation at Harvard, wrote a book called Beyond Winning. And it's principally a book for negotiation for attorneys. Harvard Law School, Professor Mnookin, Bob Mnookin, is the head of the whole program. Professor Emeritus, no shortage of academic accolades, well-earned. And the second chapter in his book, because I'm going through Harvard Law School's negotiation course, ultimately taught there, under Bob, the tension between empathy and assertiveness. And I remember seeing the title of that chapter thinking to myself, there's no tension, as if you can't do one or the other. And in reality, it was a great title for a chapter. I make everybody on my team read it because there is no tension. It's a sequencing issue. So you should be assertive, but you should be empathic first. Demonstrating understanding puts you in a position to be direct because it takes away the other side's ability to say, well, you don't understand. Well, if you just demonstrated what you understand, which is not saying, I understand, that's horrible, but it's articulating what you understand. And Bob's got this great empathy loop in the chapter. And it says, basically, lay out to them what you think you understand. Let them guide you in, AKA, also known as correct you, or confirm that your understanding is correct. And if they correct you, circle back around and lay it out to them again. And continue in this loop until you get the magic response of, that's right. And then that puts you in a position to offer your thoughts, to offer your position, to assert, to say what's on your mind. And it probably makes you smarter in the process. That's one of the big advantages of this is it's an analysis process, which you're refining your intelligence every step of the way. So there's kind of no downside to getting smarter.
Yeah, the magic words of that's right. I remember that from our last podcast. It's you want to try and get to that right. But the sequencing piece is really powerful. What do you say to those people that believe that that's somewhat manipulative to trying to elicit empathy first and then speak about what you're trying to speak about?
Well, manipulation is in the eye of the beholder. And it's really, what are you using it for? If you're using it to hurt somebody, and you can, a long time ago I read an article, the title was The Dark Side of Empathy. And I thought, oh, well, this will be interesting. I don't know if there is a dark side. And in point of fact, people bond with you so much when you demonstrate empathy towards them, they bond with you, that it does put you in a position to manipulate them. But if you're manipulating them, what you're doing is stuff that in the long term is against their best interests, which is a bad idea if you believe in long-term trusted relationships, which I do. In my company, the Black Swan Group, we advocate use of tactical empathy for long-term trusted relationships. Negotiate for long-term trusted relationships. Never hide from the other side what you're trying to do, because if you got to hide it, then that means, your intent is ultimately to exploit them. And your intent should not be to exploit them. It should be to collaborate with them.
Hey there, Inspired Souls. Just wanted to thank all of you that are subscribed to this channel. Thank you so much for your incredible love and support. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to this channel. To all of you that haven't yet subscribed, please do take a moment. As I'm saying the word subscribe, the button below is lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution, so please hit that button, hit the bell notification icon. It helps with everything we're doing, championing love, positivity, and wisdom around the planet. Thank you so much in advance. Back to Chris in today's episode. Yeah, it's interesting at this particular juncture. I think it's incumbent upon us to sort of define empathy from your worldview as well, because there's sympathy, there's compassion, there's empathy. I think these words get used interchangeably, but maybe you can help us, just tidy that up.
Yeah, that empathy was never originally intended to be synonymous with sympathy. It has become conflated with that through usage over the years. But it was originally, it's an interpretation of a German word that meant to understand the emotion that an artist was trying to convey. It was about understanding art, understanding the emotion the artist was trying to get across. And so that's really what it is. It's not agreement, it's not disagreement, it's not sympathy, it's not compassion. Now, it's a precursor to compassion. A friend of mine, Stephen Kotler, once wrote, empathy is about the transmission of information. Compassion is the reaction to that transmission. So if you just look at as empathy, basically is articulating your analysis, articulating your observations, not judging them, just expressing what you're analyzing, what you're seeing, what you believe to be the other person's perspective is, then it tends to be a precursor to compassion. It tends to feel to the receiver very compassionate, and it tends to trigger compassion, but in its purest form, it's just a relaying of information.
Why do you think there is such a dearth of inherent empathy and compassion in our communication?
Because people have come to define it as sympathy or agreement. And that limits who you can use it with if that's the definition. You can only have empathy with people you agree with or feel bad for, which is ridiculously unhelpful. My favorite analogy when I first learned all this, I learned about empathy on a suicide hotline, crisis hotline in New York City last century, early 1990s. They were drilling in our head that it was not sympathy. And they said, it does someone who's in quicksand no good for you to get into the quicksand with them. That's sympathy, getting into the quicksand with them. You both die. You don't enable anyone at all to be able to solve their problems with that approach. And that was my original learning in all of this. And it holds true to this day. It's a rock solid principle to this day of great communication.
In a world that's becoming more and more polarized, it seems like we're less able to empathize with each other as well. Do you see that in the world at large at the moment?
Yeah, I often wonder if the world's really becoming more and more polarized or if the reporting of it is trying to convince us that it is. I
Ah,
become so much more suspicious of all media reporting these days. I mean, just with the 24-hour news cycle, it has driven the competition for clicks, and so much of it is opinion and analysis. Now, I don't know how much of it wasn't opinion and analysis before. Again, I'm a last century guy. I'm a pre-internet, pre-cell phone, pre-technology dude. And I can remember in my younger days when our information sources were 3 networks on television and newspapers. And I was always told, read about the same story in 3 different newspapers to really figure out what's going on. So I don't think the media has ever been that good at reporting accurately, because accuracy is hard and it's boring. And it doesn't, you need a customer grabbing headline. You need clickbait. Before we had clicks, you still needed clickbait. So I don't know how much more divisive the world is. I listen to full interviews these days of people as opposed to what the media reports they're saying and trying to do. Elon Musk. Listen to a full interview of Elon on Lex Friedman's podcast. Elon's been on it a couple times. And you really want to know what he's thinking. Or any podcast, any interview that goes on at length by a skilled interviewer. Lex Friedman happens to be a very skilled interviewer. Some of them are horrible interviewers. Some of them just want to, they want to stroke the ego of the person they're interviewing, or they want to show that person how smart they are. But find a format where they've given a long interview so that you can gain a feel for what they're really thinking. And, that's a long way around me saying, I just don't trust 700 word reporting or 300 word reporting, trying to synopsize what was said and what was meant by being what was said, because the person who's writing it is either trying to be salacious, trying to get clicks, trying to be critical, all the short-term stuff that deludes us all. And whether they're on the left or the right, anybody in the media has got the same battle. It's a battle for clicks.
It's really interesting to hear you put it that way, because in my mind, what I'm hearing actually is, again, with empathy, you're listening to what's actually going on for individuals rather than just what's being communicated at face value via the media in the zeitgeist.
Yes, yeah. The face value stuff is just, maybe they didn't hear it right. Maybe they wrote an original article, a fair article to begin with, and their editor changed the title. There's just so many inaccuracies, and there's so much lumping of people together that you got to get a full interview to really find out where they're coming from.
Well, it's interesting that even extrapolating that into your, interpolating in this case, into your FBI negotiation situations as well, because it seems like you do seem to carry this, there is an inherent goodness in most people.
There is, I agree.
Yeah, can you expand upon that? Because you've been in some situations where people are doing some pretty gnarly stuff. Why is it important to recognize that? How do you continue to maintain that awareness when people are doing some pretty gnarly, pardon me, shit, but,
Well, is what they're doing because they've been trapped by circumstances. Now, how hard could that be? Well, depending upon what country you grew up in or you're residing in now. Like, if you happen to be born in Haiti these days, there ain't a lot of regular jobs out there. If you happen to be born in certain regions of Mexico these days, you can't help yourself at all. You're in an area being ruled by the cartels. You're trying to feed your family. Like, who are the employers in your neighborhood? You got no control over who the employers in your neighborhood are once you've been planted there by circumstances. So in a lot of cases, you might not have any choice. And then you get caught up in an organization that's doing gnarly things. But you had no choice. Or, you're Palestinian in the West Bank. Hamas is ruling the neighborhoods. Like, you ain't got a lot of choices there. You're trying to run a hospital. Hamas comes in and says, we're storing weapons in your basement. You're a doctor. You want to treat people. You don't go along with the people in charge. You probably got some problems. So there are a lot of people, the circumstances that they get caught up in, the tides of history, the tides of their life have planted them in some tough circumstances. And it's, maybe you're willing to sacrifice your life, which is why a lot of these organizations say, now, we're not just going to kill you, we're going to kill your whole family if you don't do what we want you to do. Are you willing to sacrifice your children's life by not playing ball? I mean, the harsh reality of some of these places should not be overlooked just because we happen to be in a free country, in a first world, to use a very old terminology, where we can do whatever we want. I don't got to worry about whether or not I'm actually going to, when the sun goes down, I don't got to barricade myself in the house. I don't have to worry about getting shot when I'm going out on the street. If I'm in a neighborhood where I'm a decent human being, but that's a legitimate consideration, I got some tough choices to make.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines.
He's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. Yeah, I think that's quite profound to recognize that there's inherent goodness within all of us, but it's the environment actually that's shaping us and sort of misconstrues our actions in some ways even. And that doesn't necessarily let the individual off the hook, but it builds a foundation from where which you can actually reach out to them, because I think there's a divide in there. If you're sort of seeing yourself as good and the other person as evil, then already there's the bridge to cross is too large.
Agreed. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I got that.
Yeah, well done.
One of the things I'm really enamored by is we spoke about last time listening, and recently I've been noticing you've been using the term proactive listening even more so than active listening. I mean, in some ways I don't want to sound rude, but it's semantics. But tell me why you use the word proactive listening and what it really looks like for the individual.
Yeah, well, active listening is a phrase that's been out there for so long. A friend of mine told me, probably about 2005, 6 or so, that it's been out there so long, a lot of people are claiming to teach it, and they're doing a horrible job. And so it's, by and large, if you're advocating active listening, do you really understand what it means? Are you teaching it in a way that's accurate? So it's kind of like empathy. It's overdone. It's lost its meaning. What is it really? Well, it really should be proactive, anticipatory. We start with what anecdotally we've learned, how emotional intelligence works. Self-effacing humor is a form of empathy. If me walking into the lost luggage counter saying, I need you to wave a magic wand. It's effectively self-effacing humor. I'm kind of portraying myself as thinking I'm stupid enough to think you got a magic wand. It's humorous, it's playful. So that was the beginning of it. And then proactively, like now in the last 10 years now, 10 plus years, maybe almost 15, we have the information from neuroscience, which is a hard science. Psychology, soft science, tough science to go with when you're trying with very little hard data. It's all observational and speculative. Neuroscience, far less so. Well, what does neuroscience tell us about the brain? Basically that the brain is about 75% negative. Survival mode is negative. Why? Because negative stuff will kill you, positive stuff won't. If you miss something negative once and it doesn't kill you, the second time it probably will. The old phrase, somebody who's been bit by a snake becomes afraid of ropes. That's the negativity in our brain, overreacting. Neuroscience tells us it's simply calling out negatives. Simply calling them out, not denying them, not calling them out in an accusatory way. Simply calling them out is the best way to deactivate them. It's not a guaranteed way, it's just the best chance of success. So knowing that the brain is negative, and the best way to deactivate negatives is to call them out. Instead of saying, I don't want you to think I'm being disrespectful, you can say, I'm going to sound disrespectful. That's the difference between the denial and calling it out in advance. That's really being proactive. And that's with anecdotal emotional intelligence combined with what neuroscience has shown us, you should be proactive because the brain is 75% negative.
Can you give us a high stakes situation where you've had to call out the emotion and how that's transformed the situation?
Well, And even calling it out in advance. When I took over the Bureau's operation as lead international kidnapping negotiator, which meant I came up with strategies in kidnappings overseas of American citizens that was most likely to get the hostage out and prevent the kidnapping from happening again. Simultaneously, two things. Get him out, save the hostage's life. And the best approach was really the bank robber approach. You give a teller bait money so the bank robber doesn't shoot the teller. But you don't give him the keys to the vault, you give him a small amount of marked money. Teller lives, bank robber leaves, the money becomes evidence. That's really the best way to approach kidnappings. Simultaneously, while I'm doing this, the President of the United States is saying the U.S. does not negotiate with terrorists. Well, there's a difference between negotiating with and negotiating against. There's an approach of using communication as a weapon to identify the other side, to gather data, to set them up. Sting operation, bank robbery, bank teller analogy. So what does that mean? Long answer to your question, calling out negatives. I show up in a U.S. embassy overseas, and people in the embassy say, the U.S. doesn't negotiate with terrorists. What are you doing here? And knowing that I'm encountering resistance and negativity from the beginning, also because I'm the expert from headquarters. The expert from headquarters is never welcome with open arms, because the people that you're showing up to help out view you as a threat, view you as, by definition, you're there because they're screwing up, which is one more reason why they don't like you. And I'm going to offer my thoughts, and I would start off by saying, this is going to sound harsh. And it would deactivate their feelings of negativity. I'd lay out what I wanted, what I thought they should do, and they would be like, oh, that's not harsh, that's just good advice. Now, if I laid out the advice, which is the first couple times I was in an embassy, without saying, this is going to sound harsh, the reaction was always negative. Like, we know what we're doing. We don't need headquarters, Washington, D.C. people coming here telling us how to do our job. First 2 or 3 times I was in embassies around the world, that was the reaction. And for whatever reason, one day, after about the 3rd or 4th time, I said, this is going to sound harsh. Suddenly they were open to hearing me, because it was going to sound harsh if I didn't warn them what was coming. And that became my method of operation in all my approaches. If I know something I'm getting ready to say based on my experience that you're not going to like, before I say it, I say, you're not going to like this. This is going to sound harsh. You're going to think I'm a jerk. You're going to think I'm disrespectful. All the things that are going to go through their mind. It becomes a ridiculously effective way to tell the truth.
Why does that work so well?
Well, I know what the brain mechanism, there's been several neuroscience experiments. Like, why does it work? I just know what works. They put people in fMRIs, functional magnetic resonance imaging devices. I'm told, kind of like a big helmet. It tracks the electrical activity in the brain. I'm also told it tracks blood flow in the brain. Regardless, either the blood flow or the electrical activity is hypothesized to show you how the brain is functioning. So they put people in fMRIs, they show them a picture that induces negative emotions in most people. I don't know what the pictures were. Could have been, somebody, a homeless person in the rain. Who knows? I don't know what it was. But I know the experiment has been done several times. And each time they showed them the photo, the portion of the brain anticipated to be correlate with negative emotions lights up. Certain portions of the amygdala, the hippocampus, they get crazy names for all these parts. And then they simply asked the people to label, to identify what they were feeling. So every single time that they identified, they called out, they labeled the feeling. Every time, the electrical activity in that part of the brain diminished. So there's 2 really important components to that observation. Number 1, it happened every time. Number 2, the degree of impact varied. So you might call out a negative emotion and it might deactivate all the negative thinking. You might call it out and it might just only imperceptibly in a very small way deactivate it, which might mean you need to call it out 3 or 4 or 5 times. So it had the same type of impact every time. The degree of impact varied. Now, why that happened, there are certain dynamics we don't completely know why it's happening. We just know the mechanism is happening. And that's been demonstrated several times to be the case.
I mean, it's a little bit voodoo-y almost because you're calling it out for the other individual and it's diminishing in the other individual. Like, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Part of me does wonder, like, our own emotional intelligence of ourselves and being able to call out and label even our emotions.
Very
how
effective.
important that is.
Yep, you can do it with yourself. And I've done this all the time. If I'm afraid, we got chatter going on in our head all the time. I came across a book recently called Chatter. Guy gives an interview on Andrew Huberman. I'm digging into it a little bit. The degree of chatter that's going on in our mind is just phenomenal. It's huge, just all the time. Constant conversation chatter that we either know we're engaged in or it's going on in the background. So you can harness that and you can say, I'm scared. If you're concerned, if you're worried, it's a version of fear. You can say, I'm scared. Like, I'm worried about how this is going to work out. I say to myself, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And every time I feel it go away, I've coached real estate agents on some very counterintuitive strategies to approach clients. And in the midst of coaching, I might have 20 people on a Zoom call, 50, 150. And somebody be reluctant to call out negatives in advance. They're like, I'm going to plant negatives in their head. And I'll say, repeat after me. I'll say, I'm scared. And they'll say, I'm scared. And I'll say it again. And after I make them say it 3 times, I'll say to them, how do you feel now? And they're like, yeah, I feel better.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the things I'd like to get your insights on is something I've been deploying in my own ecosystem with myself is it true? It's a question I ask myself. Like, let's say I'm feeling angry or let's say I'm feeling upset. I generally stop and I pause and I reflect and I go, is it true? And is it true what I'm feeling? And I'm not really labeling it out, but it is giving me a moment as I'm realizing in this conversation with you to carry a space for me to actually feel into the emotion. And generally, when I ask the question, "Is it true?" it already starts to dissipate, shift, and there's often it's not really true. There's something else underlying there. What am I doing there, in your opinion, when I'm asking myself, "Is
I
it
think
true?"
what you're really doing is kicking in your analysis in an introspective way. You're kicking in your introspection. You're saying it to yourself. You get away with saying things to yourself you can't say to other people because you're saying it as your own guardian. However you want to put it. You're your big brother looking out for you. You're looking out for your little brother. But you're kicking into gear introspection, which I think then pulls you back from the negative emotions and allows you to think about it. It allows you to contemplate it. You're not a threat to yourself. It's introspective, and introspection is a great strength.
Hey there, Inspired Soul. Join in on the conversation. What are you taking away from today's conversation? What are you learning about the art of negotiation? Have you tuned in to our previous episode? And what are some questions that you would love to ask Chris? It's likely we're going to get him back on in the future, and I'd love to ask some questions of him on your behalf. So join in on the conversation in the comments below. Back to today's episode. Yeah, I feel like when I start talking to you about conversation and negotiation, Chris, it starts to feel like a very tangible landscape that you can actually see, and there's entry points. You can strategically climb this mountain, come down into that valley. Is that somewhat how you view conversations, like as a very tangible? Because I think for most people going in, it's just a mirage, like it's an open-ended mirage. There's no real visual sort of terrain. Conversation almost feels like a terrain when I'm talking to you.
Yeah, well, that's a great analogy for you. And what I love about that is, as we think about it, everyone should probably come up with their analogies to navigate it. Sheila Heen, someone I have tremendous amount of respect for, another one of the instructors at Harvard that I learned a lot from. I think she once said that empathy was about mapping the landscape. And I think the landscape analogy is very good, just because it doesn't happen to be the one that I use. the fact that you're using it and you're finding it useful, I think is what is phenomenal and what everybody should really do. How do they find a way to use it, come up with analogies that are useful for how they think?
I mean, there was a whole conversation we had last time about preempting people's objections and then coming up with a body of work to sort of address that, but we won't get into that today. But that was really useful in terms of navigating the terrain. One of the things I wanted to tune into today was this silver bullet, it seems like the ability to walk away. It just seems like the party that's willing to walk away seems to tend to win, I think is seems to be the go. But when you're so invested in something, that can be so hard to fake. How do you genuinely come from that place? Is it always possible? Maybe it's not always possible.
Well, this gets back to your original point about taking yourself hostage. Like if you feel like you can't walk away, you've taken yourself hostage. Now, under what circumstances can you really not walk away? I mean, seriously, is actual death going to result? Rarely. Now, we might feel like it's going to be the end of the world, but only in the most dire, difficult of neighborhoods. And that's 99% of the planet is not in a position where walking away is actually going to trigger death. You just want something so bad. And since we were kids, we've been taught understand the difference between wants and needs. Do you need it or do you want it? Do you need it? How bad do you need it? You're going to die without it. Well, not going to die. So how much are we really taking ourselves hostage here? Well, I got to go to dinner. Of course, I got a date tonight. I got to go, No, you don't. So these are the hard questions about is survival, is our survival in the next 24 hours literally in peril over this or not? Or are we taking ourselves hostage?
Yeah, this reminds me of when I was introduced to the model of type 1 and type 2 decision making, and we conflate type 2 decisions with type 1 decisions, like type 1 decisions being the ones where the genie can go back in the bottle, but type 2, once the genie's out, can't. And it's interesting because I used to think that there was like a lot of decisions felt like type 1 until I had kids. And then it was like, oh, it's like life, death, and becoming a parent are pretty much the only type of life 2 decisions. But you meet people, I remember I was like, do I go to university? Do I not go to university? And that felt like legitimately like my whole life is going to change and hinge on this decision. But the reality is you can spend 3 years bumming around and then go back to university. Like it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, not the end of the world. And there's no shortage of successes on an infinite number of paths, basically as long as you remain hardworking, optimistic, and have integrity, and you learn.
The essence of play seems to be really important in and around all of this, and you've been in some really high stakes situations. Are there any certain key, I don't want to use the word hacks, but any key strategies that you invoke to sort of keep things playful for yourself?
Well, these days, I used to do life and death negotiations on a regular basis. And in point of fact, it was never one thing that was going to trigger a life or death moment. It was going to be an accumulation of things. I used to say the straw that broke the camel's back did not break the camel's back all by itself. So if you begin to look at accumulations of behavior, then what's really life and death you should see coming, and you head it off or not. And sometimes you don't have the ability to head it off, and you have to accept that. Now these days, look, I just know that playfulness is a huge advantage, and it's creating a relationship based on collaboration. And ideally, I try to keep myself in a playful frame of mind because it's going to land with you better. You're going to want to collaborate with me if I'm playful. And in point of fact, I'm going to be smarter. I'm 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. That's playful. And, talking about my friend Stephen Kotler, the psychology of flow. Flow is at your peak performance. Well, flow is highly positive. In one of Stephen's books, he wrote that adolescence exist in a borderline flow state all the time. And look at how much they learn and how happy they are and how much more you're capable of. And if you've mastered the ability to get yourself into a flow state, it's never a permanent state as an adult. It requires effort. But when you get into the flow state, you're in a highly positive frame of mind. You're so much more capable. You analyze more information. You have tremendous mental energy. People they are doing extraordinary things. I mean, Stephen's book, The Rise of Superman, human beings did not increase in physical ability by 10x, but in flow, their physical accomplishments jumped by almost 10x what they were capable of doing. And it's highly positive. So I know it's me at my maximum capability is going to be in a positive frame of mind.
To sort of switch gears a little bit, negativity, because I'm sure there's, I'm looking back at your past and the work that you do, and I'm sure even today with some serious negotiations, I'm sure stuff gets projected on you. I'm sure you sort of, end up in some really sticky, icky conversations and situations. How do you how do you not carry that stuff, bring it home, wear it on your shirt for longer than you need to, sort of thing? How do you, do you end up wearing stuff longer than you need to? How do you process the negative stuff?
Yeah, well, because I'm human, I'm sure I do. If you wear it on your shirt at all, it's too long. Getting back to this idea of chatter, like if you're ever in a negative frame of mind, if you're in a bad mood, and everybody is at some point, probably every day, your chatter is off. And just becoming aware of that and the amount that's going on with your chatter and how you're interpreting things. And another example of how I'm interpreting something. I just got back. I was in Davos for the week of the World Economic Forum. I spoke at an event that was, at Davos in Davos Lodge. But if you've heard about Davos at all, it's tough to get a room. And there's no shortage of stories of people, rich people, staying in bunk beds in living rooms. I was told that after I got there, I found out the one hotel that normally was $170 a night during Davos was $3,700 a night. So I don't know this for sure. The first night I'm there, I'm in an isolated bathroom. Fortunately, because I'm there with my girlfriend, I have a bathroom to myself. There are 3 other people sharing the other bathroom, 3. And I paid a lot of money to be a half-hour drive from Davos. And my bedroom, I'm on this slab kind of thing. And the first night I'm there, I'm like, yeah, this is horrible. I hate this. I can't believe I'm spending this much money. This just, it's like staying in a hostel. So the next day, one of our colleagues is staying in Davos in a place where she is sharing a bathroom with 7 people, and she's spending $7,500 a week. So she's paying more than double what I'm paying and sharing a bathroom with 7 people, and they got cots in the living room. So the day before, I'm thinking I'm in a negative frame of mind. Hey, this is horrible. I got something to compare it to. The day after, I'm like, well, this is great. This is the best place I ever stayed. I'm having a great time. Nothing about my physical circumstances changed. I just took a different attitude toward it. I got my chatter going a different way. Instead of comparing to something that was not a comparison, I was comparing to reality. I was in a pretty sweet position. So this is what we do to ourselves on a regular basis. This is you in a negative frame of mind. You're making a comparison. Somebody's got more than you. I deserve better than this. But it's smoke and mirrors. It's all imagined. And that's kind of what everybody struggles with if you're in a negative frame of mind. What's your comparison? And your comparison is in your head. And based on your chatter, and knowing that your brain is negative, you can assertively get in there and change the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice to hear you talk about that because, I've seen a lot of your conversations online. It's about negotiation with others, but this feels like your self negotiation, your conversation with yourself, the art of dialogue within yourself. And I'm sure as within, so without. There's so much good juice in that space. Talking about as within, so without. Um, yeah, I couldn't help but notice you have a quite a profound relationship with prayer, and one of the books on the shelf over there is Science of Mind with Ernest Holmes was a really profound read for myself. And one of the things he says is you're never clearer in your thoughts than when you're praying. Actually, it's like all of a sudden, like you might be in like a complete kerfuffle or whatever, and then when you go to pray, according to Ernest Holmes, like you'll notice, like people don't go, "Oh yeah," and a washing machine, and it's just very like, zoof, like dear God, like you line your thoughts up in a very straight line, and just that clarity of mind in and of itself is profound for what it does for you and your life. Let alone that connection to a higher source. So just love to sort of tune into your relationship with prayer and the sort.
Yeah, I pray regularly, morning and night. Probably not enough during the day. Some of that's chatter. Whatever your take on it is, and I'm very open. I'm a monotheist, religions of Abraham, if you will. But one of the 5 pillars of health is spirituality. Uh, it doesn't matter if you're an atheist, you're an agnostic, or you're Christian, you're Jew, you're Muslim, you're Buddhist. There's no getting around one of the 5 pillars of health being spirituality. Now, then, how you pursue that? You should pursue it. You'll be healthier. You'll be happier. You'll be better. Your time on this planet will be more productive. You'll be less taking up space and more contributing to the overall success of your fellow man. I happen to fall into the category of Christianity. I respect the other religions that are trying to increase collaboration and peace among our societies. They're extremists to all religions. You can't pick one out that doesn't have a portion of it that's out there killing other people on behalf of whatever they believe their religion is. Bill Clinton said a long time ago, no side has a monopoly on virtue or tears. So I'm not getting down on anyone in particular by saying that I'm a Christian. I study Christianity. I respect Islam and the Jewish religion. I celebrate their holidays and their special moments. And we've got a lot of overlap in how we see things. Certain disagreements about a few things, but a unity around a lot of things. And all 3 of the religions of Abraham are looking to get along, are looking to create a better world, are looking to collaborate with their fellow man. We've got extremists of all groups that are not willing to do that, and each one wants to take portions of our holy books and use it as a justification for violence. But by and large, the mainstream of all, and humanity has borne this out. Historically, Turkey's been a country that all 3 religions have existed side by side. You got a mosque, you got a church, and my Jewish brothers and sisters forget synagogue. If not the same neighborhood, just darn near on the same block, and everybody's fine. So I think your religion of understanding and increasing your spirituality and being tolerant of those who disagree with you and finding out how you can collaborate is a worthy pursuit of any human being.
And does it give you more resilience in the nature of the work that you do? Given what we were saying just before about, sometimes wearing things on your shirt?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's helpful. It's the more health I have, the more resilient I am, the happier I am, and it's one of the 5 pillars of health, spirituality.
Can you just illuminate what those 5 pillars of health are in your opinion? I'd just love to hear them. Yeah.
Well, my understanding is it's exercise, nutrition, sleep, spirituality, and relationships.
That grounds it in on a very practical level, because the other ones are very practical, whereas for most people, spirituality is a bit more pie in the sky, but it seems like it's very visceral for you in some ways.
Yeah, it is very visceral for me, and I think, regardless, look, you could be pursuing American Indian religions. Kind of, as long as you're respecting, trying to move in as much respect as possible for your fellow man and the environment that our Creator has put us in, stewardship we have. not abusing it, using it. There's one of the books that I've read that I really like, The Biology of Belief. He discusses, I can't pronounce it, but the belief that the entire earth is one organism, that life circles inside through, which is an interesting thought. The connection, are we all part of the same spirit in some ways? I mean, there's something there, there's something to the connection, and that's not even a monotheist approach, but there's a spiritual approach to that which calls for respect and utilization simultaneously.
Yeah, we've had Dr. Bruce Lipton on discussing
Yes.
exactly that, and it's actually one of our most well received episodes. He's a very interesting individual, in terms of what gets switched on and doesn't get switched on in our lives through our environment.
Yeah, Bruce Lipton, thank you very much. Dr. Lipton, I apologize for constantly blanking. But The Biology of Belief is worth reading. I love the book.
Yeah, and I don't think he minds you forgetting, to be honest. He's always jovial in his nature as well. Chris, at this particular juncture, there seems to be, you apply a lot of strategy, in my opinion, to empathy and listening. These two things are really central for me when I think into Chris. It's like, hey, how can we get more strategic about empathy and strategic about listening? Obviously, we've spent some time today and in our last episode talking about how important they are. And yeah, it's really interesting that we need to get so strategic about something that you would fundamentally think is so fundamental to our innate getting alongness with each other. Maybe just a quick sort of your view on the state of the world in regards to why, like where we're at with that, like how come we need so much strategy for that, but then also just how important these things are as we close out today's episode.
Yeah, well, there's less friction in my life, by and large, than there is in everybody else's. Because there are fewer misunderstandings. I'm not saying that there aren't any. But I hear what's said, and I listen very carefully to what's meant, and I get more stuff done, in point of fact. And then the people on my team get more stuff done. Like I'm mentioning, the Davos trip last week. Found out the hard way just before we took off that I'm taking my girlfriend Wendy, and her passport is good for the entire trip. But Switzerland's got a rule that your passport has to be good for 90 days beyond your visit, and hers is only going to last for about 75 days. We get ready to get on a plane. She can't get on a plane. Like they say, you can't get on the plane. So I reach out to one of my assistants. I'm like, we got to solve this. How do we solve this? I should probably get it done in New York. We get a 1-day passport in New York. My assistant initially calls the consulate or whoever's issuing them in New York, and they're like, yeah, well, we don't have any appointments for a couple of weeks, and first one we have is in about 2 weeks in Connecticut, which is a bureaucrat's response. Now, my assistant just starts, boy, it sounds like you're really busy there. Sounds like you got your hands full. Sounds like you're having a tough day. Sounds like there's a lot of demands of you. And this empathy, this application of empathy kind of wakes this woman on the other side up. She says, wait a minute, hold on. Let me actually check the schedule. And she goes, Tuesday morning, we get in at 7:00. Yeah, boom. And we solve it. Stuff like that happens to us all the time. We get that done on a regular basis. Somebody who's overwhelmed, having a tough day, giving you an automatic answer without really checking, digging in, looking for the exceptions, looking for the ways around, the mechanisms that they all have, if they feel like looking for them. People can do wonders for you if they just feel like it. My assistant Lauren is just like, yeah, sounds like you got a tough job. Sounds like people are coming in all the time with their hair on fire, expecting you to wave a magic wand and poof, give them a passport. And she darn near waves a magic wand for us. That's what happens in my life all the time. And the people that work for me, we do this all the time. Just with the application of these skills and understanding, and they're perishable skills, and we love it. And there's less friction in my life. There's more collaborative problem solving going on in my life, and the people that work with me and learn these skills than in 95% of the rest of the planet. And I love it because I'm enjoying my life so much more.
Sounds like magic. Chris, it is always such a treat and a pleasure to have you on and share your insights with us. Just love the way your work is just here to illuminate so much in terms of interpersonal dynamics, relationships, trust building, and ultimately today's conversation also helping us with, our internal work towards having really meaningful conversations and, achieving such outcomes. So thank you again for your generosity. Thank you again. I'll put a link to Black Swan, Fireside, so many incredible offerings you have in the world in the show notes in the description below for those that want to scratch the surface. Like this has just been scratching the surface. We've got another conversation you guys can go check out that dives deeper into the insights from Never Split the Difference. Thank you again, Chris, for your generosity, your being, and just the way you show up in the world, brother. So grateful for you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me back.
Yo! Hey there, Inspired Soul. You made it through to the end of another incredible episode. It is such an honor to be your brother, walking this path by your side. Such an incredible conversation with Chris today. And to all of you that are subscribed to the channel, I just want to take a moment out to thank you so much for your incredible love and support. Like I like to say, everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to this channel. Thank you so much for your love and support. To all of you that haven't yet subscribed, please do take a moment. As I'm saying the word subscribe, the button below is lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon. It helps with everything we're doing around here to support love, positivity, and wisdom flow around the planet. Thank you so much in advance. Now, in today's conversation, we talked a lot about Chris's previous episode. I'm going to link that on screen now for you to dive in deeper if you're trying to actually master a difficult conversation in your life or negotiate a salary rise or a pay rise or any of that sort of stuff or work your way into a new job. There's some really great tips and tactics in there for actually how to understand his insights from Never Split a Difference. So that's on screen here. He also mentioned Stephen Kotler and Bruce Lipton. Episodes that we've done with those guys are on screen now as well. To continue your inspirations flowing, your evolution brewing, onwards, upwards, and inwards, as we like to say around here. So yeah, go on, take your pick, make your click, and I'll see you in the next one. See you there.